Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear respected brothers and sisters in the city of Ottawa, Gatineau area, welcome back to our program. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling upon you, all believers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us all to answer the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Brothers and sisters, Jazakumullahu khaira. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all for watching us and following us on Facebook and YouTube. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be up to your expectations, and we ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to sincerely serve Him and to serve the masjid. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah, bi'idhnillah, continuing what we started from the calls of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon the believers. Inshallah, today we are going to take another call, and it is in the Surah Al-Baqarah. Subhanallah, the surah has many calls of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon the believers. And this time, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, this is the call number 11 in Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تداينتم بدين إلى أجل مسمى فاكتبوه وليكتب بينكم كاتب بالعدل ولا يأب كاتب أن يكتب كما علمه الله فليكتب وليملل الذي عليه الحق وليتق الله ربه ولا يبخس منه شيئا فإن كان الذي عليه الحق سفيها أو ضعيفا أو لا يستطيع أن يمل هو فليملل وليه بالعدل واستشهدوا شهيدين من رجالكم فإن لم يكونا رجلين فرجل وامرأتان ممن ترضون من الشهداء أن تضل إحداهما فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى ولا يأبى الشهداء إذا ما دعوا ولا تسأموا أن تكتبوه صغيرا أو كبيرا إلى أجله ذلكم أقسط عند الله وأقوم للشهادة وأدنى ألا ترتابوا إلا أن تكون تجارة حاضرة تديرونها بينكم فليس عليكم جناح ألا تكتبوها وأشهدوا إذا تبايعتم ولا يضار كاتب ولا شهيد وإن تفعلوا فإنه فسوق بكم واتقوا الله ويعلمكم الله والله بكل شيء عليم. So brothers and sisters, this is call number 11th in Surah Al-Baqarah. Still we are getting all the calls of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon the believers in the Quran. This is call number 11th in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 282. And the translation of this ayah is, and by the way, this is the longest ayah in the Quran. The longest ayah in the Quran, ayat ad-dain, is 282 in Al-Baqarah. O believers, when you contract a loan from for a fixed period of time, commit it to writing. Let the scribe maintain justice between the parties. The scribe should not refuse to write as Allah has told them to write. They will write what the debtor dictates, bearing Allah in mind and not defrauding the debt. If the debtor is incompetent, weak, or unable to dictate, let their guardian dictate for them with justice. Call upon two of your men to witness. If two men cannot be found, then one man and two women of your choice will witness. So if one of the women forgets, the other may remind her. The witnesses must not refuse when they are summoned. You must not be against writing contracts for a fixed period, whether the sum is small or great. This is more just for you in the sight of Allah and more convenient to establish evidence and remove doubts. However, if you conduct an immediate transaction among yourselves, then there is no need for you to record it, but call upon witnesses when a deal is finalized. Let no harm come to the scribe or the witnesses. If you do, then you have gravely exceeded your limits. Be mindful of Allah, for Allah is the one who teaches you and Allah has perfect knowledge of all things. So, brothers and sisters, this is the longest ayah in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 282, and it is called ayat ad-dayn. If we have uh, a loan that we take from someone and then we will return it later, then we have to write that dain, or that loan, or that sum of money. We have to write it down in a contract between the two parties, and it has to have witnesses. So let's go through the ayah and see what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command us to do in this specific ayah, the longest ayah in the Quran, and it is related to writing the debts and the loans that we take. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O believers, as we knew from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, when we hear O believers, then we have to listen carefully to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be commanding us with something good to do, or He subhanahu wa ta'ala will be forbidding us from something bad that we should avoid. When you contract a loan for a fixed period of time, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, if you are taking a loan from someone or from an institution for a fixed period of time, commit it to writing. You have to write it. So we have in this ayah ahkam, rules about writing the debts. The first one is, if I am taking a loan from anyone that will be paid after a period of time more than 3 days, that period of time will be more than 3 days, then I have to write it down. I have to put it in writing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us this. When you contract a loan for a fixed period of time, commit it to writing. Anything you take as a loan from anyone and you will pay it back after a period of time which is more than 3 days, then write it down. This is the first rule. The second one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, let the scribe maintain justice between the two parties. The one who is coming to write down that debt between the two parties, he or she, they should be just. They are there to document that transaction. So they have to write it justly, fairly. They do not have to write anything that the two parties did not do or did not agree upon. They just write what they agreed upon. Okay. Let the scribe maintain justice between the two parties. The scribe should not refuse to write as Allah has told them to write. Another rule, if you know how to write and you have an experience of writing contracts between people, especially in transactions like loans and businesses, and you are called to write a contract between two parties, you have to go and do it. You should not refuse to do that, because if you refuse, this amount of money, if it is not written down, it may not be preserved and it may go away, and the one who is giving may lose his money because of you not coming to write it for them, if the other party will not in the future will not pay them back. So the writers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you this privilege. You can write these specific transactions. So when you are called, once you are called to do it, then you have to answer the call and you have to go to help and write it down. We know that nowadays the people, they write these things and they take some fees. There is no problem in having this, as this is your job. If you are writing these things and you have a specific fee for that, that's okay, but do the job as just as you can. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they will write what the debtor dictates, bearing Allah in mind and not defrauding the debt. So the writer will write what the debtor, the one who is giving the money, the one who owns the money, is telling them to write. And this is another way that the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, just when we say فاكتبوه, write it down, وليكتب بينكم كاتب بالعدل, a just writer should write between both of you. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says those who are called to write, they should not refuse, after that he says وَلْيُمْلِلِ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِ الْحَقُّ وَلَا يَبْخَسْ مِنْهُ شَيْئًا. And the debtor should be dictating what he or she owes to the other party. So, for example, if I take some money from someone and then the scribe or the writer comes, so I took the money, so I dictate what I took. I took this amount of money and I will return it on that specific day. So it is, for me, I am saying I owe that person that amount of money. By me saying that and the scribe writing it, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding us to say and to do. So the one who owes is the one who is dictating it. So this is an indirect way of saying I owe so and so this amount of money. And this also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, if the debtor is incompetent, weak, or unable to dictate, let their guardian dictate for them with justice. إن كان الذي عليه الحق قاصرا لسفه أو خوف فليملل وليه بالعدل. So those who have to pay this amount of money, if they are incompetent, if they are weak, if they are young, let their guardians come and dictate that and let them be fair. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding us to have witnesses for this contract, this loan contract. He subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here, call upon two of your men to witness. So each and every contract, brothers and sisters, that involves a loan or a transaction that we are doing, then we should have two witnesses. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also continues, if two men cannot be found, then one man and two women of your choice will be enough. So if you have one man and two women, they can be witnesses on such a contract. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also speaks about the witnesses, and he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, before that he is giving us a reason why we are getting one man and two women if we are not having two men. He says for the two women, so if one of them forgets, the other one will remind her. So we have two sisters and then one brother. They can sign the contract of the loan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying for the sisters, they are two because one of them may forget, but the other one will remind her. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the witnesses must not refuse when they are summoned. When they are called to witness, they should go and witness. So those who are called to write, they have to go and write. And those who are called to witness, they have to go and witness. So we should not refuse witnessing contract or writing a contract. And this is subhanallah, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling upon us, and He is telling us, when you are called to be a witness, don't say no. When you are called to write down these contracts between the Muslims, do not say no. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encouraging us to write each and everything, even if it is small or big, you write it. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you must not be against writing contracts for a fixed period, whether the sum is small or great. And this is something that most of us fall in. We give each other loans and we lend each other's, and even between the family members, brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants us to be fair, and He subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want us to break the relationships of our family members and the kinship. Because in many cases, when you give money to your relatives and you do not write it down, this will be an entrance for shaitan to come between you and your relative and to break the relationship. And this happens a lot. So even if the sum of money is small, or it is between you and one of your relatives, and it is gonna be postponed more than 3 days to be paid after that, then you have to write it down. And if you don't, and something happens in the future and you cannot collect your money back, then this will be your mistake. You did not take the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Most Muslims do not do this, brothers and sisters. They just lend and they just borrow and they do not write. And then later troubles will come, and then they will call upon each others and they take each others to the court and all these things. If we just follow the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this specific transaction of writing the contract between those who are lending and borrowing from each other, then we will save ourselves lots of time and lots of headaches. And even those who are given the money, who are lending, if they pass away, then their heirs, their families, will have the right to call upon those people who took their money, and they can retrieve it easily because there is a contract written down and there are some witnesses and it is documented. But if it is not documented, as we say, shaitan will come and will tell me, you took this money from him, he died now, so you don't have to pay it back. And then even some of the relatives and the family members may not even know that I took money from that brother or sister and they passed away. And then shaitan will come and say, that's easier, so don't talk about it, don't say anything, and this is just your money. So shaitan will come here and try to take you away from the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And writing it, if it is small or big, and then also if it is something that will be a transaction between both of you and it's gonna be a couple of days, you don't have to write it down. As long as it is a couple of days, it's not very long time, and then you can just pay it off after a day or two. There is no harm on this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here says, this is more just for you in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and more convenient to establish evidence and remove doubts. So when we write it down, even if it's small, this will help us to retrieve the money later, and it is an evidence and it is convenient for all of us. However, if you conduct an immediate transaction among yourselves, then there is no need for you to record it, but call upon witnesses when a deal is finalized. So if it is a short period of 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, then you don't have to write it down, but you just do the deal and then you can pay it off during that time. And let no harm come to the scribe or the witnesses. This is another rule. those who come to write down and those who come to witness, they should not be harmed anyway. They should not be harmed because they are doing something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are part of documenting that debt. So we should not harm them in any way, shape, or form. If you harm the scribe or the writer, and if you harm the witness, then you have gravely exceeded your limits. You are doing something major. You are getting those brothers and sisters who are voluntarily coming to help you in trouble. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like that. Be mindful of Allah. He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who teaches you, and He subhanahu wa ta'ala has perfect knowledge of all things. So, brothers and sisters, this ayah is the longest ayah in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us how to write the debts and the transactions between ourselves. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us all these instructions in one single ayah. And He is telling us, write it down no matter what. If it is small amount, if it is a big amount, if it is for a family member, if it is for a stranger, just write it down and have two witnesses and document everything. Those who write and those who come to witness, they should be just, and they should not be harmed any way or shape or form. The two witnesses or the three witnesses, if it's a man and two women, and the writers, they should not be harmed too. And Muslims who do not do that, Muslims who go with contracts without witnesses, or they go without any contract and they deal with each other and they make transactions with big amount of money or even small amount of money without writing it down, they are transgressing against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are stepping over the borders and the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put for them. And we should be respectful to the borders and the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should not harm each other in any way, shape, or form. This is about this ayah today, the longest ayah in the Quran, ayah Dain, ayah 282 in Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to write down the debt and to have witnesses over the contract. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us understand the Quran, and we ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to understand the guidance He is giving us in these verses when He calls upon us, all believers, and we invoke Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the Muslim community all over the globe, and we ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our community here in Canada, more specifically in Ottawa and Gatineau area. May He subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. May He subhanahu wa ta'ala direct us all. May He subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to the best affairs for ourselves in dunya and akhirah. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Brothers and sisters, we'll see you inshallah bi'idhnillah tomorrow in another episode from our program. O believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling upon you. Wait for us and do not forget us in your du'as. Do not forget the message also from your support and donations. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.